A life-altering meeting with Gandhi in India in the 1930s resulted in the Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman's conversion to nonviolent resistance and social activism. A few years later in San Francisco, he founded the first fully racially and culturally integrated church in the United States, which is still active today. In 1953, Thurman was appointed as the first black chaplain and dean at Boston University, where he continued as a mentor to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., having been a friend of the family in the King home while young Martin was growing up. Thurman was a significant influence on King's development as a leader for civil rights and nonviolent protest. And we're told that King regularly carried Thurman's book, Jesus and the Disinherited. Now, Howard Thurman did not fit into any single theological or religious box. He was an ordained Baptist minister, living as a mystic who engaged Quaker principles. Sounds like a few Unitarian Universalists I know. Walter Fluker, the Martin Luther King Jr. professor of ethical leadership at Boston University, wrote, "Religion for Thurman is functional. It's pragmatic. His basic question is, what does religion have to say to those whose back is up against the wall? Not whether religion is going to save me and I go to eternity when I die." Those are not his questions at all. His vision is one of difference, but also of unity. He was very critical of religious dogma and practices that abetted segregation, but also interested in interfaith dialogue, in part because the church was the most segregated institution in American society, end quote. For Thurman, finding a common ground in community begins with personal self-examination. A defining characteristic of his self-exploration is also marked as differentiated. Looking inward is not done without taking others into consideration. He writes, "I have always wanted to be me without making it difficult to be you." Don't you think his words could have been foundational to our Unitarian Universalist principles? It also may ring true and sound familiar to Mandela's concept of Ubuntu, but that's another sermon. There is a tendency, conscious and unconscious, to resist the tension line between difference and unity, between power and love. In the reading this morning, Leslie Takahashi Morris calls to us, let us see the fractions, the spectrum, the margins. Let us open our hearts to the complexity of our worlds. Let us make our lives sanctuaries to nurture our many identities. I have always wanted to be me without making it difficult for you to be you. This is the beginning of interfaith relationships. Whether we're talking about people who are members and followers of different faith traditions or about being part of a pluralist tradition like Unitarian Universalism, where we have many different beliefs and no beliefs in the room. It starts with each of us wanting to be who we are. This is a vision of difference, of diversity that is fraught with challenges and possibilities that come with multiple versions of the truth. In a context of a culture that urges us towards absolutes. And it's no surprise to you, I don't think it's any different here than in Ames, that we as Unitarian Universalists resist absolutes. In the theological, cultural, racist, classist, gendered, ageist spectrums, or any other demographic spectrum, the spaces or space between us represents the most fertile ground of personal and community growth. The space between us invites us to be changed without giving up who we are. It is the compelling and meaningful place where all the fears, faiths, concepts, and ideologies that differentiate or separate us are invited and welcomed into a sanctuary of ebb and flow, where we have the opportunity to be intentional in our openness to each other's complexities and nurture each other's identities. Over time, the barriers and differences become less threatening and more reflective of the beloved community that we want to live in. In all of our resistance and complexities, it turns out we are the ones we've been waiting for. There's a benefit to remembering and being mindful of where our journey to common ground can begin. I want to be me without making it difficult for you to be you. The teachings of Martin Luther King and Howard Thurman guide us to understand that beloved community does not have to be some elusive concept or place like heaven that we strive for and may never see. It exists as possibility right here, right now. The search for beloved community is a search for something that has always been right in front of us. It's about mindfulness and intention. I want to pause on that idea of intention. Because in our covenanting, as a covenantal faith, we regularly agree to assume the good intentions of others, don't we? And while this is a noble concept, there have been times when I have questioned the good intentions of others and also of myself. The prerequisite then is that we must consider is that we have to be clear in our intentions, first to ourselves and then to others. Slow down and think of those intentions. Thurman invites us to engage and self-examine in order to identify and clarify our intentions. And he urges us to reflect on 3 questions gently throughout all of our life. Who am I? What am I for? What is the fundamental thing that I am after in life? Who am I? What am I for? What is the fundamental thing I am after in life? Historian Vincent Harding writes that Thurman knew that such searching for self-knowledge is crucial to every other search we can engage. He knew that such searching is essential to building the human community. It was Thurman who reminded us, and still reminds us as he put us, that the things that are true in religion are not true because they're in religion, but rather they're in religion because they're true. So it's understandable that such a teacher, such a guide to the deep waters that undergird all religious experience, could move comfortably among Baptists and Buddhists, could share silence and fellowship with Quakers, Jews, Muslims, and those who identify themselves solely as the offspring of the divine creator or children of Mother Earth. Let us see the fractions, the spectrum, the margins. Let us open our hearts to the complexity of our worlds. Let us make our lives sanctuaries to nurture our many identities. In the face of the current national and world horrors of systemic racism, violence, polarized divisions, political warfare, and abuses of power and privilege, any talk of beloved community existing here and now may feel hollow or naive. It's not. It's where we begin. And when we have to, it's where we begin again. Getting to beloved community is a dynamic and ongoing dance. It's not a destination, it's a journey that navigates the tension line between power and love, between difference and unity, between the margins that hold the center. We're not here in this room by coincidence. We have chosen to be together. Even so, there are challenges that are present when we come together in community that holds a broad spectrum of identities, passions, and differences. We are active people, getting to know each other, willing to take a risk, struggling, sometimes with ourselves, sometimes with others, and we make mistakes. We learn to listen, to forgive, to be forgiven, and to begin again. Do you remember the parable of the bundle of sticks? Well, I'll share it with you if you don't. I happen to have a bundle of sticks with me. And it's a simple story, really. It's about it's a family story first, about a parent and children who were not getting along and couldn't decide on anything, and he was really upset about the way that they were behaving. And so he got out a bundle of sticks, and he took one out, and he gave one the single stick, and he said, "Break that." I'm not going to break this one because I'm running low on sticks, and this was a gift. And of course, the single stick broke easily. And then he gave them the bundle of sticks and said, "Break this." And it's much stronger. So that's the basic parable, but I like to complexify that a little bit. Make a broader parable of the story that sometimes we choose to be separate from the bundle, and sometimes the bundle is exclusive. So in that sense, it's a wonderful and simple understanding of the complex intersections of individualism and community. The connection and support of community exists in a dynamic dance with the individualistic sense of spontaneity, freedom, and artistry. Now, there's a paradox in how we have held the tied bundle of sticks separately from the single stick, and that it's not part of the bundle. In The Search for Common Ground, one of Thurman's books, he points out that we as individuals can easily be seen as private islands on a boundless human sea. We may experience ourselves as irreplaceable individuals in solitary worlds. We are our own unique possessions that can never be completely shared. This sense of being grounded in self-centeredness ultimately evolves into a threatening sense of isolation. The paradox is we're never really separated. Mutual independence and interdependence is the characteristic of all life. Thurman writes, "The human spirit cannot abide the enforced loneliness of isolation. We literally feed on each other. Where this nourishment is not available, the human spirit and the human body both sicken and die." It is not an overstatement that the purpose of all of the arrangements and convictions that make up formal and informal agreements under which we live in society is to nourish one another. Life feeds on life. Life is nourished by life. It is a paradox that when we feel we are separated, we are not. Interconnectedness of our world holds all the sticks, all the individual bundles, because there are lots of individual bundles all over now, aren't there? All the communities. What can make the difference in how we experience our individual as well as our connectedness lies in our intentions and our mindfulness. Remember the 3 questions as we navigate the space between us. It is the combination of our mindfulness and intention that makes the difference here and now. When we are engaged in connecting in the space between, we're experiencing what Martin Luther King called beloved community. Other people have offered other names for the same intentional and mindful living. Anti-consumerist activist Charles Einstein calls it the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. Ecological and spiritual activist Joanna Macy calls it the great turning. UU theologian Tandeka calls it love beyond belief. Thich Nhat Hanh calls it interbeing. And Jesus of Nazareth called it the kingdom of heaven. These are troubling times. We must continue to strive for the inspiring and illuminating qualities that Howard Thurman envisioned in a culture free of racism, oppression, violence, and fear. He explored this in his commitment to interfaith work and nonviolent living, not just in behavior, but in thoughts, in conversation. My hope today is that we as individuals and in a community are able to become more mindful, to find more ways to engage in a healing and transformative process that uncovers our links, our histories, our understandings of who we are and how we are in relationship with each other and how we move in the world. May the day come when we all will know that the rainbow world is more gorgeous than monochrome, that a river of identities can ebb and flow over the static, stubborn rocks in its course, that the margins hold the center. May we find our way to the space between, and may it be so for all. All. Amen, and blessed be.